Okay, folks, welcome to my final video reviewing Rippaverse's Isom number 3. I had a hard time putting this video together because the remainder of this book is mostly blank space, and what isn't blank space is mostly something else with the initials BS. If you've watched my prior videos, you're already aware of how this book suffers from too much blank space. The book actually opens with 3 panels showing Isom doing nothing but running loudly through caves. What makes these panels blank space is that there's no text given us by writer Eric July that tells us what's going on. Consider this silent scene of Isom encountering an area full of beasts waking up from a sex dungeon orgy attended by former comic skaters. No, not really, but without accompanying text, how would you know? Later, we get a silent panel of ranch foreman Sam silently leaving Bloodruth's castle and passing by her silent pets. I can hear a field full of crickets chirping in my mind. Soon after that, we have an almost entirely silent page of Bloodruth doing blood magic to let her see somebody doing bad things to a bunch of somebody else's. As to why I should care about anything or anyone on this page, that's information Eric July didn't bother to share. After a few more pages, we're shown a near-silent invasion of Avery Silman's parents' backyard. Look at all this silence! All of the scenes here would be 10 times more interesting with a few captions sprinkled in, either to explain what's happening or to give us insight into the characters' thoughts. But somehow Eric July thinks that being a writer means communicating as little as possible to the audience, and hoping they don't fall asleep along with Isom's dad. And these pages largely blank of informative text just keep coming in scenes I'm only showing you now, like Avery and Sam's fun time at the gun range. Sure, there are a bunch of blam-blams in there, but if you didn't have these blam-blams, your mind would have filled in the gunshots for you. So these sound effects are not value-added. They're just filler to distract you from the fact that you're not being given any interesting information. Same with the introduction of Lepredo. Not only do these 3 panels show us almost exactly the same thing, soldier empties his gun at something we can't make out fully, but the crack, Brada's crash, and even the grog all feel like empty calories. You don't come away from these pages any smarter or better informed with the sound effects than you would be without them. Likewise with these pages introducing Max Salient. I don't see any real value in swoosh, rumble, gah, crack, or whatever the hell pin is supposed to mean. And the second panel in this 2-panel grouping here is just ridiculously quiet, even though the first panel actually has some meaningful text for a change. Why doesn't some editor at Rippaverse show some common sense and move this balloon to the next panel so that we're not just treated there to Max Salient striking a pose like, yes, I will neutralize the threat by showing off my bare upper arms, especially since Max Salient's accept powers are really in his legs, because if you didn't know, Max Salient's last name comes from the word salient with an E, and one of the definitions of salient is moving by leaps or springs, jumping. And that's totally consistent with how he demonstrates his powers here. He's a jump-around kind of guy. But before you give Eric July any clever points for this, realize that in another sense, salient also means standing out conspicuously, which is the exact opposite of dressing all in gray. So tertiary definition, fail. The remainder of Isom number 3 is absolutely littered with mostly silent pages, whether it's Avery weakly hitting the heavy bag, Darren Fontano taking out a business rival, Avery fighting Darren's goons, Avery versus Lepredo, more Avery versus Lepredo, Santuan versus Lepredo, Avery getting his ass blown up, and the arrival of Jasmine Newman, who spends the last half of the second page doing a stripper routine for no goddamn reason. Even the last page of the book just shows these Justice League wannabes staring at a bunch of Goodings monitors and wondering which one shows Netflix. You can pretty much fall asleep leafing through this book for all the pages that don't tell you anything. And the only thing worse than the pages that don't tell you anything are the pages that do tell you things, because those things usually consist of bullshit babble, like these pieces of dialogue from Bloodruth that I covered before, and these previously unexamined bits from one of Darren Fontano's goons. You're not going anywhere, but if you want to make this difficult, consider this a parting gift. If she's not going anywhere, you're not parting. That makes no sense. Then there's this bullshit from Avery's mom where she doesn't know what stasis means and the word peaked is given its exact opposite meaning. That's followed by this bit of confidence-boosting bullshit from Avery's dad where he should be asking his son, please tell me why I just got my ass beat in the backyard. And as we progress through the book, the bullshit does not stop. Sometimes the bullshit's in the way characters speak, like I don't know any Texan who would say, it has been a rather quiet week, and not something like, it's been a rather quiet week, or just rather quiet week. Pro tip, people. To make your dialogue sound realistic, remember that real people tend to use contractions and leave out unnecessary words. Also, real people usually don't speak in macho posturing language that completely wastes our time. Shut up. You know that I could easily kill you. You could try. You're as stupid as you are naive. Be thankful that you didn't get here sooner. I'd be thankful if either one of you would say something interesting. How about this bullshit where Avery, without any good reason, tells his sister Altona's boss, Lincoln Eusebio, that he managed to best an accept? Telling someone you bested an accept is tantamount to telling someone you're an accept yourself. At the very least, now Lincoln's going to suspect Avery's an accept. And considering that Avery's mother says they've been keeping Avery's powers a secret from Altona for literally decades, why would he trust Altona's boss, whom he just met, with even an implication of that secret? He could have just stopped it, caused a bit of a scene, and left it at that. But no, he's like, wanna guess whether I have powers? Soon afterward, Eusebio delivers some of his own bullshit. I'm the guy school teachers warn their students about. Work hard, get good grades, and you could own a biotech company. Yeah, right. But Fontano is far less honest of a man than I am. Still, wealth is wealth. So, what's your plan? I don't know what the plan is. I don't even know what you just fucking said. Oh, and since I haven't nitpicked in a while, you think maybe we could end a question with a goddamn question mark? Thank you. How about this bullshit where Darren Fontano threatens Avery with either a beating or death right in front of the client he was having a normal business meeting with? I know Darren's a criminal kingpin, but still, do you just say shit like that in front of your business partners who don't know that about you? You'd think that would sour any deal you were trying to make. Or how about this bullshit where Darren's got a box of MacGuffinite, or as it's called in the Rippaverse, Mitrox or something. That's not a real word, of course. The nearest thing I could find online was a headache medicine called Imitrex, and God, I could really use some of that after reading this book. Darren concludes this bullshit scene by explaining his master plan to his henchmen. This right here, gentlemen, will change our lives. The backbone of our operation isn't what takes place between the walls, it's the real estate. That has its limitations. If we can couple that with resources, we could quadruple our revenue while entering into an everlasting industry. Okay, that didn't explain fuck all. But we just move right along into finding out Darren's bullshit security protocols are on the same level as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who, if you remember recent news, included a goddamn reporter in his private chat to overhear classified attack plans. In this case, Darren is SecDef, and the reporter is Santuan, who isn't about to pass up this wide-open opportunity to steal the MacGuffinite. Then we get another round of some earlier bullshit where people make fun of the big scary lizard guy so that he's no longer scary to us readers. Pro tip, never have your characters make fun of anything you want the readers to truly feel is a threat. Lizard guy is a joke now and always will be. And how about this bullshit where everybody and their clothing both appear to be impervious to fire? Why have any of these battles take place in the middle of an inferno if nobody can get burned? Fire is supposed to be scary, and now thanks to bad writing, it's not. Or how about this bullshit where it turns out Jasmine has powers that can either slow down or speed up time, which means she can instantly refine the MacGuffinite by aging it with her speed up time powers, which means, well, I don't have any fucking idea what it means because we're never told what the MacGuffinite is or what it can do when refined. There is no fucking plan to this plan. It's like the goddamn underpants gnomes. Or how about this bullshit where Avery finally pays a visit to the parents of the girl he failed to save back in his past, and the parents tell him they were mostly upset because he didn't come to the funeral? Why? So you could have punched him in front of the other mourners? Or did you make a goddamn fruitcake and you were pissed because there weren't enough mourners to eat it? Still, even after all that bullshit, there is still one king piece of bullshit I found in this book. One fat turd extraordinaire. And that was this 8-page flashback sequence of a young Avery playing Pawn Stars for the first time. When I first encountered this scene, I thought maybe it would play into some future scene in the book somehow, but by the end of the book, I'd forgotten this scene was even in there. And when I flipped through the book again and stumbled across this scene, I got pissed because it felt like 8 completely wasted pages that don't tie into anything. But you know me, I had to see if there was a connection I'd overlooked, so I pored over the sequence one more time and came across this portion where Avery finds a box full of old comic books. And then he finds another box and opens it, and since we're never shown what's inside, and because everything else he's found so far has been comic books, I just assumed he found an incredibly rare comic like the Amazing Fantasy number 15 Eric had famously never heard of. But when I looked more closely at the box, I thought, no, it couldn't be. That couldn't be the same goddamn box that contains the MacGuffinite. Are you telling me we're supposed to believe that Avery found this box of MacGuffinite years ago, sold it to get his ranch dreams started, and somehow it ended up at J. Sully Ward 20 years later, where it was stolen by Lepredo, who gave it to Darren, who gave it to Jasmine to age for some goddamn reason we're never told? I had to find out. I could not take not knowing for sure whether the boxes in the two scenes were the same box, so I bit the bullet and decided to watch the entire episode of Rippaverse Roundtable number 7, Isom number 3 Spoiler Talk. I figured if Eric was clever and subtle enough to make the box Avery found and the box Darren stole the same box, this livestream is where he'd brag about it. As you might expect, there was a lot of sycophantic ass-kissing I had to wade through before I could get to the good parts. For example, lead editor Andrew Rodriguez says, I have been waiting to have this stream since I first got my eyes on this freaking script. I remember messaging Eric and being like, bro, what the hell? And you know, if Andrew had stopped there, I would have thought, I would have messaged Eric the same thing. Bro, what the hell is this mess? Unfortunately, Andrew puckers up and goes on, like, you did it. You brought it all together. You packed so much stuff into this, and then it sets up stuff for down the road. I'm hyped. From that brown-nosing alone, it's amazing Andrew's head didn't literally change into this. But he's not done. Andrew also says, when you read the ill-advised arc in its entirety, you're like, oh, there was a whole long game plan here, and everything does get tied together. It does actually make sense by the end. Wow, there was stuff in number 3 that was hinted at in number 1. There was a plan. There was a method to the madness, and it shines through so well. I absolutely adored Isom number 3. And this is Andrew now. I mean, come on, how much bullshit have I already listed that doesn't make a lick of sense by the end of Isom number 3? Do I even have to bring up how Darren reveals in Isom number 2 that he's got a gun capable of killing excepts like Santuan and presumably Avery? But in Isom number 3, not one of Darren's goons is carrying that gun? How about explaining how Avery's tossing Darren aside and walking away changes the status quo between them one bit? Darren can still mess with Avery's family however he wants. Plus, Darren's still got the Except killing gun for the next time Avery comes for him. But we're still wondering why the fuck we were ever introduced to Larry Shungite. As for laying down hints, I ask anyone watching this video to please tell me one thing that was hinted at in Isom number 1 and came to fruition in Isom number 3. And don't say Avery beat Darren, because that's just how superhero books fucking work. The only thing I could think of was the scene toward the end of Isom number 1 where we're given reason to wonder about Jasmine's real place in this whole mess. Is she really Darren's victim, or is she working for Darren willingly? But I thought this question had been answered on the next couple of pages where Jasmine appears to be aligned with Darren and even hands him a gun. Or is this not Jasmine we see here? I mean, it might not be, but since these are the only 2 good looks at Jasmine's face we get in Isom number 1 where we know for sure that it's her, you can't tell us we should have known for a fact this wasn't Jasmine too, especially when it was so many pages later, and also after being primed by the pages immediately preceding to wonder if Jasmine might be on Darren's side. There's no reason to think we don't go immediately from, oh, I wonder if Jasmine's working with Darren, to, oh, look, there's Jasmine with Darren. Now, maybe if Darren had said something like, thank you, Simone, when this girl was pouring him a drink, then we could have known for sure that the girl wasn't Jasmine, at which point the revelation of Jasmine's true role in Isom number 3 could have been at least a partial surprise. But that would require having an idea of what your reader might be thinking while reading your story, and Eric did not have, and still does not have, anybody on his staff who can give him the kind of valuable reader feedback that would let him know just how ambiguous this girl's identity is in this scene. By the way, I certainly hope nobody thinks this line, "It's about time," was supposed to be a clever hint that Jasmine's got time powers, because that would be fucking insane. Now, I think I need to pause for a moment and mention that, as hard as I'm being on Andrew right now for his sycophantic remarks, all this ass-kissing is not entirely his fault. Look at these instructions Eric gave the roundtable right before Andrew's second burst of song and praise was unleashed. I want to give everybody an opportunity to kind of talk about what they got out of Isom number 3, generally speaking. Just give us a summary of what you got from the story, what you liked about it, all that good stuff. In other words, the boss is begging for compliments. And this, by the way, is why I keep telling all of you people saying, Mike, you should work for Rippaverse, that will never happen. Because if you ever put me on a roundtable like this, I would have to tell Eric, there's maybe 1 or 2 things I found intriguing and having potential, but overall, this book is garbage, and now I'm deathly afraid to read Norfolka knowing that you wrote that book too. You see, I would instantly fail at the most basic prerequisite of Rippaverse employment, which is that you have to kiss Eric's ass. By the way, I purchased my copies of Norfolk #1 at the end of its campaign, so I will be reviewing it when it comes in. But what really astounded me from all this spoiler talk is that Eric July has no idea what he wrote. Here Eric says, Avery's like, I'm not trying to involve other people. I got the information I need. I'm going to handle what I have to handle and do what I have to do. I brought in Santuan as a wild card because when you're reading up to this point, you have no idea, no hint that Santuan has been working with Lincoln. Yeah, we have no idea that Santuan is working with Lincoln because he's not. We know that Lincoln called someone in after Avery decided to go after Darren alone. But when Santuan arrives, he tells Darren, thanks for keeping me in the group chat. And Darren says, so that's how you got here. Then when Avery asks Santuan who sent him, Santuan says, nobody. It's his business. There'd be no reason for Santuan to keep Eusebio's involvement a secret if Eusebio sent him to save Avery. Avery's basically working with Eusebio himself. Plus, it's not even an actual mystery who Lincoln called. Max Salient, who arrives just in time to finally defeat Lepredo, flat out tells Avery that Lincoln called him in. So Max Salient is working with Lincoln, not Santuan. How does Eric not know which of his characters is working for Lincoln? And Eric's problem isn't just memory loss, he doesn't recognize visual cues either. Here's what Eric says when this very picture is up on the screen. This is where Sam realizes things have hit the fan, and that's when he calls the person whom you find out later is Santuan, whom he's now paying. Okay, not only do we know that the person on the screen is calling Max Salient and not Santuan, but this is not Sam. This is Lincoln Eusebio. You're staring right at him. I mean, yeah, I know all white guys with brown hair and beards look alike, but you do realize it's Sam who dresses in Western wear and works on a ranch, and Lincoln who dresses mostly in gray t-shirts and works in an office building, right? Why don't you know your own characters on sight? And it gets even worse. Eric says here, all these power dynamics are happening at this big-ass oil field, and it's a spectacle to watch. Isom gets launched into the fucking oil tank, and Darren's like, make the shot. And his goon's like, you know it's going to blow this place up. And Darren's like, I don't care, make the shot, because he's so worried about getting rid of Avery. That does not fucking happen. It was Lepredo that commanded Darren's goon to take the shot, and it was Lepredo that insisted the goon take the shot after the goon started to protest. Darren then came to Lepredo after the place was set ablaze and asked, what the hell is this? So there's no indication that Darren was willing to see the place that he was about to buy blown up just to make sure Avery was snuffed. I mean, think about this for a second. It's not just that everything Eric said here is wrong, but he even confused his criminal kingpin with a giant fucking lizard. I haven't seen this kind of catastrophic memory failure since Yaira #1, where the Soska sisters claim they brought a major publisher's prominent character back from the dead and made her fight a child sex trafficking ring. Except none of that shit happened. If you go to Marvel's 5-issue Black Widow series that the Soskas were credited with writing, you'll see that in the character blurb of the first issue, Black Widow has already been resurrected before the series even began. And then the final issue's opening blurb says Black Widow's mission all along has been to destroy an online torture site, not a child sex trafficking ring. Somehow the Soskas don't remember key details about the story they supposedly wrote, which also happens to be the story that caught Eric July's eye and convinced him that they should write for Rippaverse. How the fuck are they supposed to be lore keepers? They can't remember the story that got them their jobs. I already wrote one Rippaverse review entitled, Who Wrote This? But do I need to make another? Because at this point my working theory is that the Soskas wrote up a treatment for Black Widow, or maybe even a script. Maybe they wrote 5 issues of scripts for Black Widow, but then Marvel took their scripts and handed it off to competent writers who could turn those scripts into something actually worth reading. And I'm starting to feel like Isom #3 is the same way. Eric wrote up a script that someone else made some changes to so that it made a tiny bit more sense than what Eric turned in. Because to hear Eric tell it, his version of the story included no reason whatsoever for Max Salient to arrive at this burning oil field and save the day. So Eric's ghostwriter tightened up the loose plot threads by making Darren's piss-poor online security the reason Santuan's there, while making Lincoln Eusebio the reason Max Salient is there. Now, of course, all this is just speculation. I can't possibly say for sure that Eric's script was finished by a ghostwriter, nor would I have any clue who that ghostwriter might be. So leaving aside all questions of actual authorship, let's get back to the point of why I'm even watching this gag-worthy love-in, which is to learn once and for all whether the box Avery finds during his pawnshop poaching expedition is indeed the same box that Darren opens 20 years later to find the MacGuffinite inside. Nope! Turns out that according to Eric, I wanted this scene to let you learn about some of the important people in Avery's past who determined the trajectory of his adult life. How does Avery become a rancher? We're planting some of those seeds. That was the whole point of this scene. So I was totally wrong about the box, which means I was totally right the first time about this scene. It's not clever, it's worthless. It doesn't communicate anything about Avery that the reader needs to know to better understand the main story. And this is why Rippaverse needs editors who have actual editorial skills. Because a real editor would have told Eric, this scene has no place in this book. Cut this scene from Isom number 3 and save it for a later book. All it's doing here is slowing the reader down. Same goes for this 3-page scene where Gooding analyzes the mystical markings on Sam's back and comes up with, well, nothing. Because they're mystical. Duh! Gooding's a scientist, not a mystic. You basically went to a proctologist looking for a mammogram. But the point is, this scene is completely irrelevant to anything that happens later in the book. Even the football watching conference at the end of the book doesn't mention Sam or his markings at all. So that 3 pages of Sam getting a physical from Gooding was likely just a way to get in another Gooding appearance prior to the end of the book. But again, a real editor would have said, enough with the product placement already. You're only slowing down the action. Save this scene for another book. But enough about another book. What's my verdict on this book? That's right, it's time for the overall score. Here are the books I previously scored, and before I give you Isom number 3's score, I need to comment on what I actually liked about the book, which was really just one thing. I like the basic concept behind where Isom's powers come from and how they work, how his powers tie into Christian spirituality, and how it makes the fact that Avery doesn't act like much of a hero throughout the first half of the arc a key point of Avery's character progression rather than a flaw in the drama. Unfortunately, the last half of the arc doesn't stick the landing. There's no sense of either repentance or sacrificial love, both hallmarks of the Christian faith, in Avery's 3rd issue turnaround. He doesn't even apologize for trashing Darren's club. The most he apologizes for is getting involved in the first place. But there was nothing wrong with that. He'd been led to believe a friend of the family was in danger and he just wanted to be sure she was safe. And for all his supposed change of heart from vengeance to Christian love, he still wraps up the conflict with a verbal threat followed by some violence. So it's pretty difficult to see how he's changed or grown at all during the course of the arc. Even the rescue of Santuan resonates less with its accompanying Bible verse than with basic bitch morality like don't leave a guy to die in a fire. And sadly, there's one thing really glaringly wrong with the whole Peaker's paradigm. One last heaping mound of bullshit we have to deal with. When Avery and his mom are talking about how he's losing his powers, the two of them converse like they've never heard of a Peaker losing his or her powers before. Are you honestly trying to tell me that in the 2,000 years since the Peaker line was started, Avery Silman is the first ever Peaker in history to not have his heart right with God and start losing his powers? Do you know how completely unchristian an idea that is? That generation after generation for thousands of years, this Peaker bloodline has been so noble and righteous before God that none of them have stumbled into a serious sin of the heart and lost their powers until Avery fucking Silman in the present day decided to be the worst goddamn Peaker of all time? Even Jesus calls bullshit on this one. What would be so much more reasonable and in keeping with the Christian faith is that this knowledge of how Peaker's powers work would have been discovered by the earliest Peakers long ago, as they sinned and repented, fell and got back up again, so that this knowledge would have been passed down from parent to child, and Avery would have realized right away upon losing his powers that he'd lost his way before God. So even though Eric had this one good idea in Isom number 3, its completely flawed execution, along with all the other gaping flaws in the book, sink the book's overall rating down to a 2.0 out of 10, confirming that this is not a company whose quality is on an upward trajectory. Eric July and the Rippaverse crew have once again proven that the company's initial success was the result of speculation and anti-woke sentiment rather than actual talent, and that their continued existence will depend almost entirely upon buyers' inertia and brand loyalty rather than any superiority in quality or dedication to improvement. And what's actually hilarious is that in its lust for quick cash, Rippaverse is now inviting readers to buy the definitive Isom Volume 1, which collects issues 1 through 3 of Isom so that readers can consume this full arc all at once and inescapably experience Rippaverse's plunge in quality in real time. It's like Rippaverse wasn't content just to publish this shit, now they have to rub your nose in it so you get that shit smell good and tight in your nostrils. Now, I still have some confidence that Isom and some of the other Rippaverse titles could actually become marketable properties in the movie industry. But for any movie studio to take a chance on Isom, Eric would have to jettison his Rippaverse ethic altogether, lay back, and let the studio have their way with his stories, because there is no way any reputable studio is going to tolerate being required to keep all of Isom's blank space and bullshit. Thank you for watching. If you found the information in this video helpful, please hit like and hype, and also subscribe if you haven't already. You can also give me a follow on any of these alt-tech platforms where you can create yourself a free account. Coming soon are my video reviews of The Mighty Golden Patriot by Yellow Flash and John Dillard, and Horseman No. 1 by Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett. So make sure you're subscribed so you'll be notified when those and other of my videos arrive. I'm Mike Partika. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.